What's up, everybody? I'm Fernando Mastrangelo, and welcome back to Design Discord. Today, I'm talking to Holly Howard of Ask Holly How and of Pyramid.work. Holly's been in the design industry for 14 years, consulting with entrepreneurs, people starting design businesses. She's basically the guru to young designers or people starting a business in this kind of creative field. Today, we talk about all sorts of interesting things like social media, the bottlenecks, pricing, running the business, all the stuff that everybody wants to know about. Holly is the expert. She has a deep knowledge of all of these things. She has a newsletter. She has a podcast. She's all over the place. She's also starting this incredible business called Pyramid.work. We get into it. It's all about AI. And we've been wanting to talk to someone about how AI is going to change this industry. And Holly is at the forefront of it at the moment. And so we get into that part as well. It's a really exciting conversation because she's got an incredible story about her life as well. So we get into a lot of it. And I'm excited to jump in right now. So let's get into it. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Fernando.
Yeah, and it's nice to finally meet you. You know, I've had so many colleagues take your program, work with you, and just speak so highly of you. And in fact, I kind of at one point was like, man, maybe I should do this program, because at the beginning of my career, it was like so much was going on and trying to organize all of that. But you have a really interesting story, you know, and there's this great podcast that you've done where you explain your whole story. So I don't want to go like, you know, do the whole, because it was such a great one, but I think people should listen to it. But you have an amazing story because you really started off as a dancer, and that's really where your story begins. But like, maybe, you know, take us through how you got, you know, to music therapy, to, you know, to working at Marlowe and so. I mean, it's just like a crazy, story.
Yeah.
So yeah, give us a little bit of your history.
Okay. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
And it's been a pretty magical journey. Although, like, I will say in the midst of that journey, it's been hard. But so yeah, I'll do the whole like thing as quickly as I can, because I think every experience matters. But yes, so when I graduated high school, this is 96. Actually, the day before I graduated, I got accepted into a Joffrey Ballet training program. Right. And that really changed the course of everything, because I thought I was going to go to school, to college, and then I got in and I was like, I'm not, you know. And so I did this training program, and that's when I remember calling my mom and being like, I have to dance, like I have to be a dancer. And luckily I had really good teachers that when I came back to Chicago helped me get a position with the Ruth Page Ballet, which was the main ballet in Chicago at that time. I became a member of the AGMA union, which was a really big deal. And I started my career, and it was very fast in the sense that within 3 years it was over. I got mono halfway through. I like to say I just wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to sustain a ballet career. It's really intense. It's really hard. I didn't know how to deal with rejection or just the intensity that came with it. So when I knew it was ending, I was like, I don't want to go to real college yet, so I'll go to music school. So I picked up my bassoon and I auditioned for Berklee School of Music, which is in Boston, mostly because my best friend was in Boston at the time, but also because I had heard of Berklee and I had heard of music therapy. So I auditioned, I got a small scholarship, I left for Boston. I get to Boston, I start learning about music therapy. I started learning about the brain, and that was really my favorite. I started learning about the work of Oliver Sacks, and that's what brought me to New York to do my internship at Beth Abraham up in the Bronx, which is where Oliver Sacks worked. And I did my internship, and then I became a music therapist. I did that for a few years, and then I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to become a neurosurgeon. I thought I was being a neurosurgeon. I'm like, I'll go back to med school. I thought I had like peaked.
It's so wild to think of someone that starts in dance to then go to neuroscience. It's like, it's just so funny.
Yeah. So then but I was like, I'd gone through a bad breakup, and I was like, I need a minute. So I quit my music therapy job because I also was like, not having it with the administration of the hospital. We actually butted heads a lot. So I got a job at Marlowe Sons, and this was the summer of 2004. And New York was so alive, and not that it's not alive right now, but post 9/11 New York was a very extremely magical place to be. So I worked at Marlowe Sons. We would just like go out and hear amazing music all the time.
Party.
I mean, like it was so amazing, right?
I was there. Those were my days too. Those were, I
Yeah.
remember Marlon Sons diner and all that stuff around there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'd like ride our bikes over the Williamsburg Bridge in high heels, you know, and we'd be like out on, you know, second and second at the hole. And it was such a great atmosphere. And so just did a lot of partying, but also during that year, I ended up recording on the bassoon with a few bands. I ended up being photographed by a really famous photographer named Roe Etheridge.
You love his work.
Yeah. And just like these magical things happened for me. And then I applied to Columbia and got in because I had to do my pre-med. I couldn't go right to med school. So I went up to Columbia starting in 2005. Kind of after that year, I was like, all right, I'm actually partied out to the point where I was like a little concerned. I was like, if I don't get back on track, like you could just see people like burning out, you know, from like a little too much partying. I was like, I got to get back on track. So I went up to Columbia. At the same time, I got a job at Lenox Hill Hospital as a medical researcher. Spent 3 years on that path, published medical research with the team there. We were in orthopedics, and it was with a doctor named Dr. Ranawat. And then when I was applying to med school, I just started to like kind of have a breakdown in the sense that I thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon, but I also thought I was going to do an MD PhD. Long story short, the process to apply to medical school, like you have to meet a lot of deadlines. It's like very, there's no flexibility, let's say.
Okay.
And so when I was like, this isn't aligning for me, and I was told, so I got a C in calculus my first semester at Columbia. And immediately my, you know, counselors were like, you're not going to get into med school with a C. And I'm like, it's calculus. Like, I'm never going to use this. And I did well. Like, I did well in organic chemistry and all of these things, but they were like very negative. So anyways, as I'm going through the process, I'm like, I'm not going to med school. Like, I'm not going to do this. This doesn't feel good to me. I drop out again. I start working at Egg in Williamsburg.
I remember it well too. Oh my
yeah.
God, yeah.
And that was 2008, 2009. And even that time was pretty magical in Williamsburg. Like, you know, everybody was there, you know.
I always wonder if it's us being nostalgic for our own time or if that's actually true, you know? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
like
think
Fran Lebowitz is always saying like, nah, New York is the same. It's just the same place, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I think about that all the time, especially because I'm deep into Love Story on FX and
the one with the John F. Kennedy. Yeah, so am I. I'm watching all the episodes. So
yeah. But I do think like what was different about that time was the freedom I felt. I think because there were no cameras, like, you know, there's no camera phones. It was a lot cheaper to live in New York.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like living out on, you know, second, third stop of the L was like cheap. You know, it was like, okay, I'll live off of Lorimer. And you're like, cool. But Lorimer felt like you're like, what are you doing off of Lorimer?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But Egg was where I really learned about like business. And at that point, George, who owned Egg, was like, do you want to manage? And I'm like, sure, I'll figure this out. And we were able to, you know, I started looking at financial systems and bookkeeping and how do you build a team and what is company culture and how do you train people properly and going through all those fundamental things. And the restaurant was able to become profitable enough to give people paid time off and healthcare, which at that time was rare, you know, like, and we paid our cooks over $16 an hour, which again, back, you know, this 15 years ago was very rare. And so then I actually went to Congress and did a congressional briefing with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, and just talked about, this is when like the Healthy Families Act, and there was a lot of movement around like sick time or paid family leave, and talked about why good business practices matter. And really after that, then in 2010, I launched my consultancy, just like kind of dabbling with some clients while I worked full time. And then I took the leap in 2000, so it'll be 14 years. So 2012, I took the leap and started it full time. And I connected to the design community through a program I did at Industry City. So I did a business growth program, and that's where I would say it was really Rebecca Atwood who kind of like opened up the kind of like, I don't know,
Pandora's box of
designers.
Design?
She connected me to Nick Cope, and Nick Cope is, you know, the world's greatest connector.
Yes,
and so then a lot of people started coming in after that. And so I started working with a lot of manufacturing businesses, teaching people how to either start or grow their business. And I've just been doing that for the last decade. And then I'll say one more thing. In the pandemic, I went back to school to get a master's certificate at Harvard, the extension in religion. And I think that's important because it speaks a lot to how I approach my work, just in terms of like purpose and why you're doing what you're doing. So that's kind of
that was very fast explanation of many, many years.
Yeah,
And I think I would recommend people listen to that podcast that you did where you go into depth about all of those. I think where the story changed for me was like when you went to Marlowe and Sons. Only because that seems interesting because you're doing these kind of high level things, and also your life, from observing it or reading about it, it feels extremely charmed and it's extremely like kismet things that happen to you.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's like, if you feel that same way, because like you're also going to like Columbia, Harvard. It's not like these small schools, but then you go to Marlowe and Sons, which is like a restaurant in Williamsburg. Do you see your life in this kind of like high-low kind of way? I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. So I'll give you a little anecdote, just like the high-low is that there's one week in my life, this was back after the pandemic, but I don't know, I want to say like maybe 2022. So I'm from Illinois. We have a family farm in Southern Illinois, and we still have that farm. We've had it for 150 years. It's passed through the family. It was corn and soybeans, or still is, and winter wheat. But anyways, my grandma died. She lived to be 100. We go back, my uncle's like going through things, what do you want? And he pulls out the pictures of the relatives that have, settled Illinois, basically. And it's dark. I mean, it's very dark, that family history, like just a lot of history of child abuse. Like the man who settled from our family, like I think he killed 2 of his wives. He raped his daughter. She ended up committing suicide. Like, there's a lot of darkness on that side of the. You're like, this was not the podcast I showed up.
Like,
but
okay.
Yeah, and so we're like, my husband and I were sitting there, and my mom's side of the family, my grandma had 8 siblings, so there's a lot of relatives, and we're like fact checking these stories, and it was so hard to digest. Like I had known that my grandma was severely abused. Like her dad punched her teeth out of her mouth. Like it was intense, right? Like. It's extremely rural. I like to say that but I explain it. I'm like, when Hillary Clinton was like, those people are deplorable. I'm like, she's probably talking about like my relative. I'm like, I am that deplorable. It's like, I come from this generation. But this is like one side. We wrap up the work there. I fly back to New York. That Saturday, I'm at Princeton. It's homecoming. My dad was the captain of the basketball team at Princeton. He was like top of his class. He was a star football player. You go to Princeton, you sit in the varsity club. I mean, and you sit amongst, you name it, like senators, judges, presidents, it's like, it's crazy. And I feel equally comfortable in both environments. I can sit and talk to my mom's side of the family about the wheat fields and, what's going on, with futures, and I can go to Princeton and sit with my dad's colleagues and, carry on those conversations, and both environments work for me. So like when you're like, and then you go to, Marlowe, in some ways it was like, I mean, at that point too, so this is before I went to Columbia, but I carried student loan debt. My family was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Right. But I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not at ease and I have to figure this out, So I just took the leap. But to your point, taking that leap was incredibly magical. I met the most incredible people in Williamsburg at that time. Like I said, I have this picture that Roe took of me. It hangs in my house, but it also hangs in museums now, and I'm like, cool. It's amazing.
So then you develop, Egg is also really where you cut your teeth in terms of like the business side of things.
Yeah.
Was that kind of sets the foundation for the consultancy where you're like, I can do this. This is like a very interesting thing for me. And also, I mean, your father was a CFO, correct? So you had some knowledge of like numbers growing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us. So, because I feel like that's kind of crucial. Like that's where you were like, okay, I'm going to teach this.
Yeah. Know? So when I was at Egg, that's when George was really like, you can figure it out. I had freedom, and probably like too much freedom. I mean, the reason I left Egg was I was like, there's no leadership here for me, you know, like, and there's no opportunity for growth. But the gift of that was like, I was in the books, I was in everything. And I really could figure out, like, you know, I love the field of forensic accounting. Do you know forensic accounting?
I know accounting pretty well, but not forensic accounting, but like where you just dig into every little number.
Yeah. It's like exactly how it sounds, right? It's like you go in and by looking at the books, you start figuring out like where fraud is and like what's going on. And there was no fraud at Egg, but it really teaches you, like when you look at somebody's numbers, you're like, I know.
Tells you the story.
It tells you the story. You're like, I know exactly what's going on in
totally.
this
I
business.
love seeing P&Ls.
Yes.
I'm like, show me your P&L. I'll tell you everything about you and your business.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
like, that's where I really learned. And I think I was comfortable with numbers because, I mean, I had come off of Columbia, and obviously in pre-med, you study statistics, you study data, and I was a research assistant. So, you know, data science was like, where I was just enmeshed in it, you know. So that's really where I was able to cut my teeth. And then my first client was Pies and Thighs.
Okay. I remember them too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sarah and Carolyn and I worked together at Marlowe. And so when I was at Egg, they were opening Pies and Thighs. Well, it had already opened, but I ended up consulting them. And that's where I tested, like, can I teach people how to do this? Do it. And then it just went from there.
Wow. So then, obviously, the foundation of everything that you talk about, or that you do, is purpose becomes the kind of center of it. When did that kind of develop?
At Egg was the first time I learned about company culture, you know, just from a theoretical concept, because when you start learning about business, the first business book I picked up was Management Lessons from the Mayo Clinic. And the reason I bought that book is I was like, well, Mayo Clinic, like, I know medicine, I don't know business. Let me read this. And they really talk about values and all of that. So I was like, okay, like, I get this. But then when I went out on my own and I started consulting, it really hit me because I started what I would call as like an operations consultant. Can I help you write a job description, create a training checklist, you know, all of those things. But what I realized is like, if I can give you the most beautiful systems, but if the culture's shitty, it's not going to work, right? You can have the most beautiful financial plan, but if your culture's really bad, you're never going to be able to realize it. And so that's where it really started hitting me like, oh, culture is like, it's everything before strategy.
And there's probably like really no way for culture is individual, right? So each company will be individual based on the purpose or the values of the founder, essentially, or of the founders.
Yes.
And so you start to build off of, like, kind of take me through a consulting session, you know, in a way. Like if we were, you know, because a lot of young designers listen to this, and so if we were, you know, new company coming to you, how does it work?
Yeah, it is a really good point that your culture should be absolutely specific to you. And I think the problem, and I actually see this in the design community, is that people are trying to be like other people, especially when you're young, right? Like you might look out and say like, Fernando, he's so successful. What is he doing, right? Like, well, why? Let's do that. And there is an aspect where you should absolutely learn from people, right? You should look out and learn. But what I see happen every time is that then suddenly you end up someplace where you're like, how did we get here? Because what works for Fernando might not work for Holly. And so you really have to take a step back and think about what are my values? And to me, the way that I approach that is that you have to create your values from your lived experience. It has to be from your lived experience, meaning like your past, your history, everything you've gone through. Because if it doesn't come from that place, it becomes this manufactured thing that you're trying to be, and it's impossible to sustain.
What if they're, you know, if people are really young, you know, they're just starting off, what if they don't really know what their values are?
Yeah, it's a great question.
You know, like I'm 23, 24, just got out of college, and I need to make money, and I want to do design, you know, do you kind of like forensically audit their past or their lives?
Yeah. So I've taught at both Pratt and RISD.
Okay.
And each time I take the students through values exercises. I'm actually going back to RISD in a few weeks to do a values-based workshop with them to understand, like, how do you build a career based on your values? And it is that, right? Like, it is a lot of reflection, of like exploration of like, how did I develop my point of view is essentially what I'm trying to get at. And no matter what age you are in life, you always have a point of view. Granted, your point of view changes between your teens, your 20s, your 30s, but like you can always try to understand, why do I believe something? Why do I behave in a certain way? And that's really like, why I behave in a certain way. Those are my values, right? And so you can ask yourself these questions about like, what did I learn? What truths did I absorb? What do I attune to? And why is that?
And so does that affect the type of products that someone might make? Or, you know, because what if they're just like starting off, they have like a good two or three pieces, two or three things that they want to start with their company with, you know? I'm trying to make the connection here of how that works, you know? Because sometimes you have those things before you have anything else. And you're like, well, I want to start a company with wallpaper, let's say, and I have this one cool wallpaper I want to launch or whatever.
Yeah.
So do you start to build the ecosystem around the product, their values and everything? You start to kind of like build it around all of that stuff?
Yeah. I think that, let's say I have like 3 products and I want to start this business. Well, the most important thing that you can think about, the next step, is who's on the other side of that. Who's consuming these products, for lack of a better word, right? Or
that's good.
Who's engaging with these products? That is such an important question to ask. And I do think in design, we don't spend enough time thinking about that, right? And
totally.
It's such an interesting thing because it's a marriage, right? It is a marriage between your creative vision, what you have brought forth from yourself in these products, and they have to end up somewhere in somebody else's life. They become part of somebody else's life. And if we don't take the time to understand that, it's almost impossible to build that bridge. And that's where I see young designers get stuck, is that they're not able to think about this. And years ago, I would like help people understand how judgmental they felt about the people that were purchasing
buying their stuff,
right?
That sounds, yeah.
They feel extremely judgmental about the people that can afford to buy them or that have them in their life. And so helping people, like, how do you build that bridge? Because without that bridge, it's impossible to sustain a design business. And so that would be like, if you have those 3 things, the first thing that you have to do is find the people and find the relationships for the people that want to engage those things. And then when you're ready to start growing and expanding, like, your values certainly come into that. Because I tell people, like, one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is, how do you want to spend your day? Right? How do you want to spend your day as a designer? And when you really start thinking about that, that's when people start having epiphanies about like, oh, wait, do I want to manage a team of 5 or a team of 10? Or do I just want to be a small person? And this kind of goes back to our, like, it's not a one size fits all. It's about what's right for you, because you, Fernando, might want to manage a lot of people, but me, Holly, might not want to, you know? And if I look at you and think like, that's the way a design business is, I'm not going to win, you know, I'm going to feel lost.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that. I mean, I definitely remember thinking growth was the only way and growing a team was like the only way. But, you know, what happens with that is burnout, you know, you end up, or realizing that you're creating, maybe the products and the stuff that you're making was not really what you intended, like that the business you really wanted to create, you know? Yeah. I mean, I found myself in all of those iterations over the years, you know, so it's been, yeah. And I guess I was modeling a lot of it off of other studios that I saw in the way that, they were growing.
Yeah. I think it's really, I was just talking to an interior designer about this, a young interior designer, new practice, you know, a few years old, about how much you really need to self-validate. And this becomes so important to like know who you are. Otherwise you're like, oh my gosh, my peers are doing this and I'm not doing this. And then you start questioning yourself instead of recognizing that like, that might not be the right choice. Because I love the word growth. Growth is so important, right? We should always be growing. But growth doesn't mean more people, more products. It can mean new materials, new markets, new ways of, manufacturing that product, new clients that you're talking to. Like there's a lot of different things you can think about.
What do you think some of the things that come up time and time again when you're consulting? For me, like one of the things people ask me about all the time is pricing.
Yeah.
This is a huge conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it leads back to what you were saying earlier about knowing your audience or who's going to be buying this stuff. I think one of the things that happens is that a lot of designers, they have to realize if they're going to be product people. In my world of like collectible design people, everyone seems to want to be a little bit of both, and they don't know where exactly they fit. They're like, well, I don't want to make 1 million of these objects over and over, but I can't charge $20,000 for each piece. So they're in the like $5,000 range or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so there are different markets that they don't need to enter, and I think gets a lot of confusion there. So pricing is always this question of like, well, what do I charge? And I have some rules around it, but I would love to hear your approach to this.
Yeah. Well, we'll stick with product-based businesses,
Okay.
right? And when you have a product-based business, you're going to have cost of goods sold, right? So
Totally.
What are the materials that go into that? Sometimes people put labor into that. That's like the most foundational way to think of pricing, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, I just look at my cost of goods sold. I add a multiplier, so-and-so told me 4X, so-and-so told me 8X, whatever. And we look at a multiplier. That's kind of like when I meet young designers, that's like the baseline information that they have. The way that I think about it then is like, okay, right, we have to understand that, but what's your overhead cost, right? So outside of cost of goods, what are the other overhead? Then let's also look at the market, right? Let's look at what other people who are in a similar space are charging, and let's look at who's bringing this into their life and what they're willing to pay for it, right? So then we can kind of do that. But I say, once you've done all of that, the actual most important step that you can take is to ask yourself, but what is this worth? Like, what is the perceived value of this? And perceived value is really hard for people to understand. And this is where we start to get into the psychology of money, right?
Yeah, I love this. Yeah, I want to get into this.
Yeah. And this is where when I teach financial planning, the first thing I teach is your mindset, right? Like, what is your mindset about finance? What is your mindset about money? Because until you kind of unearth that, you're going to have a lot of tension in how you're pricing your products. And a lot of times I see people aren't growing, but it's not because there's no market. It's not because there's, people not willing to buy. It's because they won't charge what they should charge for that product. And therefore they can't grow in their market. So for example, I say like, aside from like the fact that I had an interesting journey, my dad was an alcoholic, which was like a pretty insane upbringing in the sense that like he lost, he's like the original Don Draper. I say like he had vodka in his desk at work, he lost his job. We lost money. A lot of things were like, shut down. And there was a lot of scarcity. Like, my parents were very fearful, and he was very fearful about like, don't spend money. Money is bad, and then you get the money is bad. People with money are bad. And so when I got into this myself, I had to really think about that. Like, why is that, or like, why do we have these mindsets? And everyone has something about the way they think about money. And so to get to that perceived value and really understand, like, how does this impact somebody? How do they feel around this object? What does it do for them when they bring it into their life or when they pass it on to their children? Like, if you aren't thinking about that when you're pricing your product, you're probably not pricing it appropriately.
Do you think that it has to do with the storytelling of that object or of those things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the storytelling's everything.
It's everything, right? Yeah.
It is everything, especially... I had a designer and she made pillows, and it was like a $350 throw pillow, right? And she's like, we're talking about the store. I'm like, well,
is that a lot or a little?
Well, I know. Right now, I'm like,
I don't know. I'm like, I think that's like an average price for a throw pillow at this stage in life.
Well, at this stage in life, yes, exactly. And her response was like, well, it's just a pillow. And I'm like, no. When I go to Target and I buy a pillow, that's just a pillow, right? When I pick up a $350 pillow, that's not just a pillow. Yeah. Like, and it isn't, and even the people that like don't blink twice at that number, it's not just a pillow, right? They're bringing that pillow in because when they're hosting those dinner parties and those people see what pillow they have on their couch, you know, like it's not just a pillow. And so it is all about that storytelling, which I have often seen can make designers uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. They will say to me, I communicate visually. And I'm like, that's amazing. But when you step into entrepreneurship, you also have to learn how to communicate verbally. And it is a skill set that you have to learn how to grow. And then I was just working with a designer this week, and she's like, I don't want to brag. She has this amazing story, this amazing lineage. And she's like, I don't want to brag. I'm like, you're not bragging. You're educating people, right? Like if they don't understand why something is priced the way it is, or, you know, the lineage of that object, they're not going to understand why they're paying so much money for it.
Yeah, I love this idea. Like, so do people come around to understanding how to value the work? You know, when I early on, I came from making sculptures for 10 years. So when I entered the design world, I didn't know how to price things outside of how they were priced as art. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, well, this object in my sculptural practice would be $20,000. Okay, well, that's what I'm going to price this at. And I didn't get any pushback, so I just thought that was normal. You know, I think now looking back, I'm like, oh, wow, to start, you know, my first console was $20,000. It's like, okay, that was kind of high and kind of special. But I wasn't sure it was because I was completely naive to the design world and they let me slide, or if it had to do with this perceived value of this. I love that idea because it's like, you're like, there's a lot of woodworkers, right? Let's say, and it's like hard to, well, what is this wood table? Why is BDDW different than so-and-so or another American woodworker? Like what makes the difference there? And I always personally think it does come back to how you're telling the story, even how your website looks, and then how your Instagram looks, and all of your marketing, how that feels to people ends up really communicating that. And I want to get into social media with you because I think like we should definitely talk about social media. But those are the things that I think like weirdly enough psychologically can raise the prices of things, or let you understand where you fit in the ecosystem of coffee tables that are handmade, you know, like handmade coffee tables, $5,000 to $10,000 coffee tables, you know, like that marketplace, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a question there, but that's where I feel this perceived value thing needs to be understood by each designer and what they're trying to. And I think also the cost, like if you're making a bronze cast table, right, there's just inherent value to having to do those processes. Yeah. Does that come up a lot where you're like, oh, well, you know, you're using, you know, poplar wood to make your stuff versus, you know, these are hand carved stone works or something like that, you know? Is that come up, you know, when you're looking at these works as well?
It definitely comes up, and you're making me think of a few things that I tell people. One is that I tell people, so even like when you're making objects, you're probably selling those objects to, well, either in a gallery, right, or an interior designer who each one of them then has a client on the other side, right? It's like there's multiple layers that right. you have to get through, and that has to be convinced about that object. That's right. And I tell people that remember that they don't speak your language. Mm-hmm. So even when you're like this, you know, wood or this, you know, just because somebody can afford to buy your work does not mean they understand it. And they don't speak your language. They don't know why that wood is valuable. They don't know why that material is valuable. And I do think that we do a disservice with the design community when we don't help them understand that, like, all of this knowledge and these things that you think are incredible, these materials, which truly are, the person multiple steps down doesn't understand that, doesn't understand why that is. And you have to be able to speak clearly, articulate why that has value for people. So that's one thing that I think is really important for people to learn. And then again, it can be a little uncomfortable with, you know, because they're like, well, why don't you see that this table's amazing? Mm-hmm. You know?
Do you ever you start working with someone and you realize like some of them then want to have their own brand and their own business and sell direct to their clients. Do you ever think, well, or tell some clients that, you know, maybe you're better off with a showroom or gallery model, like where you're not really, you know, an entrepreneur the way you want to be. You know, creatively, I think you're just better off having someone manage those things for you. Yeah. And how do you distinguish that for them? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because speaking of like who's on the other side, I will have people flat out tell me, I don't care who's on the other side. They'll be like, I don't care. I don't care about the customer, you know? And
Okay.
I'm like, that's fair. Like you have a right to that, but you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Like if you don't care who's on the other side, to your point, get a gallery or get a rep or do something, because if you don't want to do that work and you don't want to engage, like that's like the literal definition of commerce, right? So yes, there are definitely people who have a lot of feelings about that. And it's like a healthy realization. I mean, I help people shut down their businesses all the time.
I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're like, yeah, you're not really making money. You're not, your costs are too high, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you know what? You're better. They're like, I just love the making. I'm like, that's great. Go make for somebody else. Right. Because if you don't want to do all the other things that come along with entrepreneurship, like, don't do it. And we do live, I mean, like this might be a bridge to social media in this time where you get a lot of messaging where it's like, well, just put up your website and a social media feed.
People are just going to traffic your
And
website
you're in
just
business.
randomly. Like,
Yeah. And you're
No,
in business,
yeah.
you know, and like you hear these like Squarespace or, you know, commercials and you're like, oh my gosh, it's such bad messaging because it's such a myth about like, that's how it works.
So yeah, let's get into social. I mean, you've shut yours down, just to let people know. I mean, although you're doing Substack and other cool new ones, social medias in a way. I came up in the time of social media. My career in the design started in 2013, essentially right at this pivotal time where I could post a photo and actually get tons of followers from that one post. That no longer exists. We talk, you know, it's changed. It's all video based now. You know, when you get out of school or whatever, when you're starting your business, you don't have to be getting out of school, but starting your business, like that seems to be the thing that everyone starts with. You say, well, I got to get my social media, you know, right. What are your thoughts around social media at this stage? You know, is it becoming an antiquated thing? Are there new avenues? How do you market outside of social media essentially at this point?
Yeah. I'll leave like my personal, like,
Okay. Yeah, we could leave that aside. Okay.
I'll leave my personal feelings aside and just talk facts.
Sweet.
So even when I was teaching at Industry City, when I met like Nick at Calico and Fort Standard and all of these design companies, Channing Kai, and I remember being in those lectures. And so this is like, that was 2016. So, but sort of similar time, right? When it was still super hot.
That was still, yeah, hot.
It's very hot time. But I was like, hey, I want you to go to all of your followers and I want you to actually like go through the list and who is actually there to purchase from you versus who is there lurking to see what you're up to, right? And like that was the first time, even back in 2016, because people would have these amazing followings, right? I mean, back in the day, you could grow insane followings so easy and so fast. But even then I was like, you have like a fraction, 10% of those people are actually going to buy from you, right? Like, oh, you're 75 or less. Oh, those 75,000 followers, like, or less, right? And so that was the first epiphany where people lightly started being like, oh, I thought that 75,000 meant like, you know, that there were like a lot of people here to buy. So that was sort of like the first moment. But then when I would start looking at people's data, so when I work with people, I'll look at their website analytics, where's traffic source, you know, like where are people purchasing from? And it just didn't add up to me. I'm like, you're spending all of this time creating all of this content. And you know what? That interior designer just actually wants a clean spec sheet. They just want prompt email responses. They just want good follow through, accurate lead times, you know, on time delivery. And nobody was thinking about those things, right? Because those aren't the sexy things to think about, right? Like let's have our really tight lead times and what's that delivery like? And like, how are we nurturing that relationship? And so that's when I really, for me, the wheels started turning. I'm like, this isn't like what we're making it out to be at all. And I tell people, like, you can certainly, I look at it like a calling card, right? Like our window dressing. You walk by a store, the windows are done. You can have the same thing for your Instagram. But if you think that that's what's growing your business, you're totally wrong. And to this day, people will be like, no, but look at how many like trade signups I got from my Instagram, or like, look at this. And I'm like, yes, I understand that. But like, look at all the other places when you're actually out at shows, when you're actually doing this, you know, like when you're actually doing cold outreach to new studios to introduce your work. Like, this is helping when you're actually sending newsletters out. Like, all of these other things are actually moving the needle more. But it's a really hard thing for people to, I think it's a hard thing to let go of for people. And even like,
I mean, let go of altogether would seem crazy.
Yeah. People, I think, fear that they're going to disappear. I even tell people, like, Pinterest is going to be a way higher referral source for anybody. If you look at your analytics, if you look at where your traffic's coming from, if you put time into Pinterest, it's always going to be a higher referral source. But there's something about Instagram.
Do you recommend, like, now that Instagram has become pay to play, if you're running ads that are targeted, do you recommend that people do that, or in Pinterest as well? You know?
Yeah. Ads are kind of like a hill I'll die on when I say that, like, they do not work. And what I mean by this, because again, you're probably old enough to remember this time, but when you started doing digital advertising again back in 14, 15. You would get like a 10x ROAS. You would get these insane, like 16x ROAS. I was just with a client and he had a 2x ROAS. And I was like, and his digital consultant was trying to convince him that those are good numbers. And I'm like, these are not good numbers. I'm like, back out your cost of goods, back out the agency fees, back out all of these things. That customer is never going to repeat with you because it was just a one-off ad that they clicked on. I'm like, it's so like, we don't fully understand the ecosystem of how things work. And so that's why we're like, oh my gosh, but it made a sale.
The thing is that I feel like it's because there's not a lot of transparency into the business. Like, you may, so you do your newsletter, you do this, you do your Instagram. So, and inquiries come in and you're not 100% really sure where all those inquiries. And what I've realized over 12 years of now doing hefty sales is like, most of it's repeat customers.
Yes.
And so we ultimately look at the business and say, okay, well, what if we spend time on these 150 people that have bought from me for the last 12 years, and how do we really, cater to them, or, keep them up on what's going on versus let's put more ads into Instagram to keep growing the following. Now, I do think that what happens in our culture right now is that people will look at the Instagram and say, oh, they have 100,000 people following them. They've got a blue badge. Okay, that must mean that there's something or somebody, right? Which I think everybody wants to get to that point where they have the visual of their success.
Yeah.
And then they can maybe relax a little bit from it. But I think that everyone's still thriving for that, when I think that you're right, that there's other ways, if you really dig into your business, that you realize, oh, there's only 100 players out here.
I was just going through this with a lighting designer, somebody I absolutely adore, have been working with forever. And they went back, same thing. And they went through their top buyers of like 23, 24, 25. And they came back to me and they're like,
5 people.
She was kind of like head down. She was like, so it's like none of the coolest people that we thought, she was like, they're just normal interior designers buying our products. Right. But these people are very famous lighting designers. And they think, and I'm like, yes, like it's just normal people engaging in commerce, and like she was like, wow, we really kind of ignored them because we were like, they're not the like cool designers, but they're like building our entire business. And I'm like, yes. And this is what I mean by like, who is on the other side? Who is purchasing these things? And it took them, they've been in business over 10 years before they looked at that, and then the lights started going off, and now they're like really thriving because they're fully engaged in nurturing the relationships and like recognizing that commerce is relationship based.
Yeah, especially in the design industry, I'm realizing it is a somewhat antiquated business. A lot of it's relationships. A lot of it is it's not like a modern, you know, business where, you know, there's AI, which we're going to get into, but so it's almost like the Luddite of business, of industries. It's weird, and I wonder. I think it's because it's such a personal industry in the sense that you're designing someone's home, you know, and it's a very personal thing, and the people are very private who are using interior designers. There's all this, you know, nuance to it that's not like other industries, and you kind of have to understand that, to market correctly, you know, and maybe it comes down to a lot of networking, but a lot of people don't love, you know, having to network, but that's how this industry kind of works in a way.
Yeah. And I too am like allergic to the term networking. Like,
yeah, I don't love it either.
I don't think anybody does.
No, nobody likes it. But yeah, I mean, I'm social. I like meeting people.
Yeah.
And I love meeting people that buy my work. And like, okay, but I'm not. Yeah.
I just say that, like, if you just be curious about people, then you'll do well. You know, like that's all you have to do.
So there's all this knowledge that you've collected over the last 14 years? Yeah, 14 years. And now you're taking on this venture, Pyramid. Mm-hmm. You call it a pyramid scheme in some of your, which is kind of funny. I like that. But let's get into this. A lot of people have been talking about AI. It's all over. I was just on the subway. There's like another AI for making this and that. I'm like, okay, there's AI going to be everywhere. Now, tell us about Pyramid. Tell us what it's going to solve, and you know what the data you've kind of collected to create Pyramid, and how you've done this. Like, it's a really interesting product.
Yeah. So I say Pyramid is going to be the strategic engine for the entrepreneurial economy, meaning that, like, it's clear now more than ever that entrepreneurship is like one of the most viable pathways forward, and it's where the economy is going. Whether you think of an entrepreneur as somebody that has a team or is just a business of one. And sometimes people are like, am I a freelancer or am I an entrepreneur? And I'm like, a freelancer is an entrepreneur.
It's an entrepreneur, yeah.
Yeah. So when I say it's the strategic engine, what I mean by that is right now in technology, we have, you know, task managers. You've got Notion, or you've got Asana, or you've got Monday. We've got our communication channels, like our Slacks, things like that, WhatsApp. But we don't have anything that helps us create a strategy. You cannot go out online right now and say, I want to, you know, I'm doing a collectible design business. I need a strategic plan for the next year, for the next 3 years, for the next 5 years. There's nothing that does that. And for years, I'd been wanting to open a school. Like, that's where my thought had been. I'm like, I really want to open a school. But when I started using AI about 3 years ago, you know, when ChatGPT dropped and you were kind of like, oh, this is clunky and weird, whatever. But I remember the day that, I don't know why, but I opened it up. And part of what I do a lot in my job is to write job descriptions for people, right? You're hiring a team member, you need a job description. And I opened up ChatGPT and I was like, it's this type of business, it's this size, write the job description. And like that. And I was like, oh my God.
Was it good? You were like impressed?
Decent. It was decent enough that I was like, what would have taken me an hour, right, to sit down and be like, hey, what's the role and who are they reporting to? And, you know, like, what are the tasks? Like, was just done. And not that, again, everybody knows with AI, you got to check it, you got to edit it, you got to finalize it. But that assist was life-changing for me. I was like, oh my God. And so I started using it basically in everything, right? Because to create procedures, to create marketing plans, you name it, you know.
Us too.
It can do it, right?
Yep.
And so 2 years ago, I realized, I was like, this is it. Like, the technology is ready. I'm ready. I'm going to create this company. And the name Pyramid comes because when I teach business growth, I teach about this triangle, which is like you as the creator, your company, and your customer, right? Those things are all part of the ecosystem. And the culture is right in the middle.
In the middle, right.
Yeah. And so when I was like, what is a triangle that you can walk into? And then I was like, it's a pyramid, you know, and pyramid is like the balance of the, you know, creative side and the, you know, strategic side. So that's where the name came from. And it's really taking these 14 years of methodology that I've developed in terms of business growth. And I've, created this onboarding where you basically come into Pyramid, you build your pyramid. So you define your values, you define your purpose, and you define your vision. You go through this AI assisted process where it asks you questions and it pulls out this information and you define all of those things. And once your pyramid is built, you will then enter the chamber where you can.
Okay.
I
like it.
Yeah. I was working with a tech consultant. He was like, okay, we can do that. I don't know if it'll stick, but I like it. You enter the chamber, and within that chamber, then, like, once your purpose, values, and vision are defined, it will generate your strategic plans for you. So think about, like, as a solopreneur, right? You don't have the resources to hire a marketing consultant or a PR consultant or, an operations consultant or a financial planner. And Pyramid will generate all of those things for you. And within that chamber too, you can generate then, if you do hire, operating procedures, you can generate contracts, but everything will be aligned through your purpose, your values, and your vision. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, where that is so different from ChatGPT or Claude is like, yeah, I can go into Claude and I can say, like, these are my values, but I have to constantly remind it. And I have to constantly tweak, where Pyramid is going to be a closed system in that, like, that it's only for you. So your pyramid's going to look different from my pyramid. It will also track everything for you. So it will tell you, Fernando, here's where you were for 2025. Here's how many customers you served, your average order. Like, it will basically do it all.
And that means that you'll be inputting your QuickBooks into it, this kind of thing? Like integrating your...
So it will connect.
Okay.
So as we move into agentic work, the agents will be able to connect those things and be able to pull that information, and or you can upload reports to it. But yeah, like, that's the exciting part about agents, right? Is like, you'll be able to connect all of those things.
Talk to me a little bit about the PR. You said, it'll help you with PR in terms of kind of coming up with a PR strategy, because how do you effectively execute on, like, a PR, a strategy that Pyramid will give you?
Yeah. So I work with this amazing PR company called Daily, and I used to have an individual from Daily come and teach a guest workshop for the students that I had. And she was so lovely. Her name was Haley, helping people understand, like, we know, especially young designers and people starting out, can't afford PR. PR is expensive.
That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Yes, it's expensive. And so basically what Pyramid will help you do is identify, well, one, what's the pitch? Two, who are the journalists? What's the right outlet? Who's the right outlet? Who are the journalists at that outlet? Again, like all AI, you're going to have to check it. But you'll be able to find these things. And then Haley taught people, like, set up an email account that's like press at,
Okay, good. Yeah.
So it doesn't
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it was Haley's. But I love it,
No,
and
you should. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you can start pitching those journalists with the, the pitch and the names that you have.
And Pyramid will help you put together the pitch and, and the email and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is basically going to become the tool for all designers. This is going to be like their hub, their what they come to every day and sort of use as their team.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And can you talk about the cost of? Or you're not set on that yet?
Yeah, I mean, so right now we're saying $30 a month.
Okay.
We're pre-launch, so
I know. Yeah. Tell us where you're at with the company, because this is also, this is going to be a big journey for you as well. I mean, you've taken some time to not fundraise and really get into what the product's going to be, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I got the URL 2 years ago. It was April 24.
Pyramid.work.
Yeah, Pyramid.work. And then full disclosure, my first investment was from my family. And so that allowed me to pursue getting an identity done. So this is a fun story. I was at a Calico dinner and I sat down next to somebody. And this person, his name is Johnny Bauer, turned out to be basically like the head of brand for Blackstone. And so hit it off and had a great conversation. And so years later, when I formed Pyramid, I reached out to him and I was like, I need an identity. And he was like, we want the project. And so I came in to his agency called Fundamental Co. They did the identity. It was there that I met a gentleman named Forrest Young, incredible designer, really led the creative behind Pyramid. So I spent the early time doing that. I worked with them. I got the identity done. The identity is sick. Forrest did the rebrand of Uber. He did Rivian. He is just like an incredible human being. I feel blessed to know him. So we did the identity, and then I started fundraising last spring. So I started fundraising and very quickly was told you need tech in-house. So when I started talking to people, they were like, you need tech in-house. I'm clearly not a tech person.
You mean an engineer?
You need a CTO, engineer, developer, whatever. So over the summer, I decided, okay, I'm going to pause fundraising and I'm going to go find this person. And this, speaking of like magical stories. So I had done
like
this.
Kismet things that happen to you? Yeah.
So I had done this panel last July at Neuhaus.
I watched some of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
And so if you watch that whole panel, like one thing that I used to do with ChatGPT, which it actually won't allow you to do anymore, is I like to do seances with it. So I would be like, you pick a few people and you're sitting around a table and you're like, what spirit did we conjure? And then ChatGPT will like tell you what spirit you conjured. And so as I was preparing this panel, I wanted to do it in the form of a seance. And so I was like preparing it with ChatGPT and I'm like, all right, if this is the panel and these are the panelists and these are the questions that we go through, who are we going to conjure? And ChatGPT was like, you're going to conjure Hypatia of Alexandria, which most people don't know. So Hypatia of Alexandria is kind of known as the first female intellectual. She was just this like really insane woman. And so I went through this panel. We talked about her. We talked about how she would relate to technology nowadays. And when I got ready to start reaching out to people for the tech position, I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to do cold outreach. Like, I'm not in the tech space. I don't know anybody. And I really started with the Khan Academy because, do you know the Khan Academy at all? The Khan Academy is kind of like the gold standard in online education. So years ago, I thought I was going to go back to med school and I needed to study for my MCAT. And I went to the Khan Academy. It's a free online tool. Anybody can use it. It's funded. It's very well funded. SalCon, actually the Khan Academy and TED Talks just came together this year. But anyways, so I start looking on LinkedIn at the Khan Academy engineers and I find this guy who is a senior AI engineer, but he studied the classics. So I sent him a cold outreach on LinkedIn and I'm like, hey, I'm starting this project. I need tech support. Would you be interested in talking? I'm like, and even if not, I see you studied the classics. I just did a seance with Hypatia. We conjured Hypatia. You might like this. He wrote me back 2 days later. He's like, let's talk. Wow. And I knew, and when we worked together, he was like, I get recruited all the time. I mean, AI engineers are like, they're like the hottest commodity, right? Like, and, I think it was just the fact that I could like speak to his background in the classics, that it, had that quirky introduction. And so I worked with him all fall and he was, I say, like a guardian angel of Pyramid in the sense that like we had initially set out to raise 5 million. He's like, cut that in half. He's like, you need 2.5. He's like, you don't need 5. He helped me put together the entire product and taught me how to train AIs. Like he was like, you don't need a CTO. He's like, you just need a developer. Because I had reached out to him wanting him to be a CTO and he was like, you don't need that. Like, and for a consultant to be so honest, and like I see that in myself a lot to the point where like people don't like it, right? When you give them honest feedback. But it was magical. And so I put the whole thing together. I was able to build it myself in Claude, the prototype.
Really? Wow.
And now I'm able to go back out and I just started fundraising again.
Well, tell me a little bit about how are you building it? Are you taking the Ask Holly How, all of the data you've accumulated over the years, or yeah?
Yeah,
Explain to me.
not data.
Not data. Okay.
So just frameworks. So all of the
Okay.
teaching frameworks I took and I started putting it into Claude. And that's the first step. And I was like, okay, this is how I teach it. These are what the actual worksheets look like, the Google Docs that people fill out. How do we start turning this into a software? And I worked with Claude to do that.
Mhm.
Like, if it looks like this is a worksheet, what's it going to look like as an interactive software? And then that helped me start building the frameworks for how you build your pyramid. And then the most important piece, though, that my consultant really helped me with was how we train our AI. So sometimes people have a lot of feelings about AI because it's sycophantic, right? So if you remember
4.0, the chat GPT. Yeah.
which I saved some of those chats because they were just incredible, right? The way I was like, whoa, this is so manic, you know?
Yeah.
But so when I was working with the consultant, I'm like, I want a chatbot that's going to like connect dots for people, that's going to synthesize information, that's going to push back on them. Like, hey, Fernando, you know, you said you're going to hire, but you also said like you're stressed managing a team of 10. Like, why are we hiring again? You know, like I want it to be able to do those things. So we went through all of this programming of how it could do that. And so built out all that programming and then just started building the product in Claude.
And you're in beta.
Yeah, so we're in beta. I've started sharing it with people.
We'd like to beta it. On our side.
Yeah, and it's been amazing. Like it really already people are like,
well, what are you learning from the beta? Like, what are you learning from it right now? Like, as people use it.
I think one thing that I'm learning. So when I was working with my consultant, he's like, you know, in traditional tech, what happens, right? You can gamify things. And this is all the bad things, right? You can gamify it. You can like basically get people hooked. Like, why are they going to not stop using this product? And I remember like having like an existential crisis. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I mean, like I like games, right? Like I was like, can we like put bricks into the pyramid as they answer questions?
Oh, cool. Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah. But like, I don't want to use any addictive technologies. It just like goes against everything that I believe in. Where pyramid is so different is that it fundamentally reflects such deep, profound things about who you are and how you operate that people are loving it because they see, and my consultant was like, oh, you're building a technology that teaches people about themselves. He's like, this is a technology where you're going to learn about yourself. You're not just going to run a business, but you're going to learn something. And that's been what the response has been, where people are like, oh my God, like it's been pretty amazing.
So now, I mean, it's really interesting because you're now putting your own Ask Holly How into practice as building a company in front of everyone.
Yeah.
That you've consulted, and in a way, like if your purpose and culture and all the stuff that you've talked about, if that works, this should hopefully work as well. You know, do you feel on your personal side like a little nervous and scared of this, like knowing that, well, it's a big deal for you to like put yourself out there and do this type of company it could be very public in a way, you know?
Yeah. I think what was been interesting when I started fundraising last year, I met with some really traditional VCs and people in tech, and they were like, okay, here's how fundraising works. Like, you've got to get people in and fast. And even I talked to the CFO and they're like, because investors have FOMO. So if like your fundraising goes on too long, it's going to be a bad sign. And like, you just have to like,
the Peter Thiel way of his book that he wrote, right?
Yeah. And all this, like, basically, I'm like, so you're asking me basically to kind of like manipulate people to make them feel like they're going to miss out if they don't get in. I was like, I don't work like that. Like,
that's not your purpose or your vision or your values. Yeah.
And even like pausing the fundraising again might have in the traditional tech world looked poor, right? Like, well, why? What's going on?
Right.
And I was like, I'm almost 50 years old. I didn't get this far to then betray who I am, right? I did not get this far in life to betray who I am. So I have just like been doing it in the way that feels good to me. But I also recognize like I have super high level of personal accountability, right? Like I am incredibly self-disciplined. I'm also incredibly intelligent. So like, I don't worry, like, yeah, everything has a chance of failing, right? But like, I think the gift that I've been given, like I've worked with thousands of companies and not just like lightly, like deep deeply embedded in understanding like what really makes the levers turn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that like, I know what rocks I need to like look underneath, and I know what I need to be aware of and look out for. And so I like, yeah, it's been super interesting. My trajectory has been slower than most people in a startup or in fundraising, but I feel like tech, there's so much potential in tech. And from my perspective, it's been profoundly disappointing. You know, like just to go back to like Instagram, I'm like, well, but what a shitty technology.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's made people more depressed than anything else, honestly.
Yeah. And like, why? But we also don't have a diverse, you know, group of voices in informing what that technology looks like.
I also don't feel like Pyramid's going to be like it's you're doing it not for the tech world, but more so for this industry, for an, you know, specifically. Well, I don't know. It can probably expand outside of design, obviously. But is it really, it's more tailored for the creative entrepreneur than anyone else? Or what are you thinking? Yeah.
No, I say it's for the whole entrepreneur.
The whole entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Okay.
because even my practice,
Right.
if you have a laundromat, it's going to work for you. If you have a
Yeah.
farm, it's going to work for you. And the reason, too, I feel confident in it is, like I said, like this methodology has been developed for 14 years. So I'm not that traditional startup that's like, I have an idea. You know, I'm like literally just taking something that has proven results and changing the format of it, right? And putting it into a technology that's only going to make it better because it's alive. Where like before, when we would create these plans on Google Docs, well, you got to go to your Google Doc, you got to pull up your Google Doc, you got to like search through.
Mm-hmm.
Pyramid's alive. It's like, Fernando, it's Saturday. Like, why are you working? You know, like it's going to like save, you know, like it'll be like.
I like that. Keeps me accountable to taking the weekends off.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's part of my purpose or
yeah,
my
if
values.
that's part of exactly.
Right. Because at the beginning, you'll probably answer those questions where you're like, hey, well, I want to have work-life balance. I want to work 5 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it seems like what it'll eventually be, I mean, once it's out in the public, it's going to be like, cool, this will be the thing that young entrepreneurs can use to kind of launch their business without the major costs of all of the other stuff that they would have to normally pay for.
Yes.
And keep them organized and focused and hopefully help them grow their companies. I mean, they still have to have good product and they need to do all that other good stuff, but
yes,
it's the basis of their company. Yeah, cool.
The basis. And just to go back, like our question about pricing your product, the way like Pyramid's pricing.
Will it help?
It will help, right? Because the way that its pricing module will be set up is to ask you those questions about like, okay, cost of goods, but like, what about find 3 competitors? And like,
right.
And now like, let's talk about perceived value. How are you telling the story of your product? So it's going to prompt you to do all of those things. You can say to it, I don't like networking. It's going to say, okay, what are the environments that are right for you just to build relationships? Like, let's throw out the term networking. And so it'll be able to do everything except for like put you out into the world.
And so is Pyramid going to also be aggregating all of the information that all of the clients and starting to create some crazy meta AI beast that knows everything about everything? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it will. So yeah, it'll start to understand like decision making and how people are making decisions. And
wow, you're going to be able to like really distill this businesses down to what the key factors are of success or whatever.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that like, again, I'm a researcher at heart. So we want to have a research institute. We want to put out a lot of research for people so they understand. I think that there is too much like, I always say the media is never going to tell the story about like the grounded entrepreneur who only worked 35 hours a week and like had family time and went to the gym. You know, they like want the like crazy.
No, they want the like 24 hours a day. I hustle. Yeah, they want the burnout. They want the like,
Yeah. So we want to put out different information for people because I feel like I have it all personally. Like those are my clients. Like I see these people that are doing this, but it's so behind the scenes that nobody has access to that information.
You're also doing your podcast. How many times does that come out regularly now as well? Or what are you doing with the podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast is going to switch over to Pyramid. So the podcast was launched under Ask Holly How. So it's currently on hiatus right now until we get everything over to Pyramid and sort of restructured. So our hope is that it'll launch probably this summer or into the fall. It'll
really keep people to what's going on with Pyramid. Are you kind of like focusing everything on that now? Are you still doing consulting, or will you continue?
I still do consulting.
Okay.
I'll continue to consult, though as Pyramid launches in the year goes, I'll minimize the consulting that I'm doing because Pyramid will become my full-time focus. I'll have a team, and we have a lot of exciting things that we're working towards over there.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I think that Pyramid that I really like that I read about going into schools.
Yeah.
And you've worked at Pratt and RISD. I've criticized a lot of those schools, especially RISD, because I've done reviews, end of year reviews with the seniors, and I felt panic for these kids leaving school. I'm not joking. I was like, you are not prepared to do anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't even know what they want to do. Weirdly enough, they're like, I just got this degree.
Yeah.
And they don't know what they want to do. And so I feel like, I know you're going after some schools to kind of like integrate this. So how would Pyramid help that kind of education system? Or prepare people a little bit better? And is that something that you think about,
I constantly think about it. So when I finished Columbia, I was $120,000 in student loan debt, right? So which will actually be paid off this year.
Congrats.
And, thank you. But, it was a huge chunk of change.
That's huge.
And when I was teaching at RISD, I went through this exercise because I was teaching, what they call like professional practice. And I'm like, okay, You're leaving school. The way that I see it, and this is what Pyramid for Schools is going to do, is like, you're still going to build your pyramid. What are your values? How do you want to work? What is your purpose? What are your motivations for work? And what kind of life do you want to build? What's your vision? And from that, as a student, you think about 3 pathways. You think either I'm going to go get a job, right? But I want to find an employer that is relative to my pyramid, right? Either I'm going to become freelance, or I'm going to start my own studio, right? Like those are the 3 major pathways.
Yes.
I'm probably going to like go through a bunch of them at some point in my journey. But it will help me, like when I was teaching at RISD, to your point, we got into the financial planning class and I'm like, okay, you're a freelancer, you moved to New York, you get paid $60,000. Let's create
First of all, how do you move to New York and become a freelancer, period? Because you don't know anybody.
Well, Fernando, and it was so endearing. And like, so we go through the budget and they're like, I get a 1-bedroom apartment for $3,500. And I was like, you're wiped after taxes. You're wiped out. I was like, that's your budget. And furthermore, I was asking people who had student loans, I'm like, what's your student loan payment going to be? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm
a lot of kids leaving RISD don't have student loan payments. Although yes.
Yeah. But I'm just like, I think we do. And I'm going back to RISD. I'm actually going back in a few weeks to teach about AI and to teach a few things. And I love the premise of RISD. Like, I was raised as a ballet dancer. Like nobody understands like history of craft, lineage, like that real like devotion, reverence for craft as much as I do, and I know that that is part of what RISD teaches and holds so dear to themselves. But the reality is that those students leave and they are in the real world. And what is the purpose of higher education? And this is the big question. I mean, AI brings this up, right? What is the purpose of higher education? And that's a question that these universities have to answer. And it's something that I realized. And we are, as you said, going after a handful of universities because we're like, we can either embed with your professional practice course where they can kind of like go through a pyramid module before they leave, or we can be your like main professional practice. And the early conversations that we've had with university administrators, 1, they love it. 2, they're like, because what we want to do, the vision is that you create your pyramid and you go through all of this before you leave school, and we'll hold your pyramid for you. We'll hold it up to 5 years. And so when you're ready, you can flip the light switch on and you kind of have all of this information that you use to plan, but that you're not leaving and going out into the world, not understanding how money works, not understanding how do I meet clients or how do I even get a job? It's like, I think there's we do.
Would it be the AI for the school essentially?
Well, schools have like contracts with Claude, right?
That's
so
what I
like,
figured.
Yeah, I know like Claude and Chad and even
But you're
Gemini.
also going like creative school. I mean,
we want to start.
When you're also using a lot of, I love how you're putting all your worlds together. You're going through RISD, Columbia. You're going to the places where I think you have connections and you can get things done. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, start where you're at, start with relationships that you have, and have these conversations. So there's like still a lot of unknown, but what's been so promising about the conversations is we're all aligned. Everybody's like, yes, this is a problem, we know we need a solution, and so
the faculty or the administrators of those schools recognize that there is the problem.
Oh yeah. Yes.
See, because as an outside observer, I just think that they're like, they don't see it. They're just like, let's keep teaching them how to make stuff, and think about making stuff, but not really about how they're going to be artists or designers in the world, like when the...
Yeah. Well, RISD, this is public knowledge, has an initiative now called RISD Ready that just launched this year. They're looking for, if anybody listens to this podcast, they're looking for an executive director for that initiative, RISD Ready. RISD Ready means like that you're going out and like, how do we get people ready to be out in the real world?
Oh, that's great.
Because they recognize that like there's a big disconnect right now.
Wow. This has been awesome. Tell people where they can find you, because I think some people may want to reach out to you as a consultant, or even if you're doing fundraising. So if investors, somebody's interested in learning more, how can they find you?
Yeah. So you can find me at askhollyhow.com. So that's my consultancy. So if you're interested in that, and then you can find me at Pyramid.work. Ask Holly How has a lot of resources. It has the podcast, it has old newsletters, there's things there, but all of my publishing now is over on Pyramid.work. So if you want to follow along on that journey, you can come over there. And that's where I'll be talking about like the beta launch and wait lists and things like that.
And you have a wait list right now?
Yeah. So we have a wait list right now. And so we're just,
you want a lot. You want to get it out there.
I want to get it out there so bad. I'm so excited. So I'm excited to meet the right people like I mentioned, the tech consultant and what a miracle that was. And like, I have a lot of faith in magic.
Yeah. I think that's been your life, is a lot of magic has happened. So
yeah.
Holly, thanks again. And
Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks for joining me on another episode of Design Discord. I want to ask you guys for a favor. Please send this podcast to a friend, especially this one with Holly. She's incredible, and I think it could help a lot of people. So forward it to a friend. Hit that subscribe button. If you're not watching on YouTube, check it out on YouTube. We're recording these things so that you can really see the conversation between us. And again, on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're all over the place. Find us there. Send us comments. Hit that button. I know it's hard, but just click it. Just click it, please. Anyway, we're having fun doing this, and that's the only way that I can continue to do it. So subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Love you guys. See you soon.